Welcome back to another deep dive, and I am genuinely thrilled you are here with us today because let's be entirely honest for a second. You are not tuning in for the surface level fluff.
Right.
You are not looking for a quick 20-second highlight reel. You're the kind of listener who wants to look under the hood. You want the real, thorough, perspective-driven analysis without the filler.
Exactly.
Whether you're prepping for a heated tactical debate with your mates at the pub, or trying to catch up on the incredibly complex modern shifts in the sport, or you're just insanely curious about the raw numbers driving the narratives we all argue about, you are in the exact right place.
You really are.
Today, we are undertaking an intense, highly data-driven post-mortem of the recent Arsenal 2-1 victory over Chelsea, and we have an absolute mountain of material to draw from. We are pulling advanced statistical breakdowns from the XG philosophy, tactical post-match data from the Athletic.
And perhaps most revealingly, the raw, unfiltered, incredibly passionate fan reactions.
Oh, they are intense.
So intense. We've been scrolling through the post-match forums and subreddits of both the Arsenal and Chelsea communities right after the final whistle. It really is a fascinating cross-section of information to synthesize.
So what's our mission today, then?
Our mission today is to unpack the modern tactical landscape of the Premier League. We're using this specific, highly volatile match as our perfect microcosm. We are going to examine the immense tension between the modern, highly pragmatic defensive mentality that we saw deployed in this match and contrast it sharply against the perceived dominance of historical teams.
Right, the absolute legends.
Exactly. We were talking about teams led by Titans of the game, Patrick Vieira, Dennis Bergkamp. We want to understand what has fundamentally changed. And we aren't just looking at the tactics on the whiteboard. We are looking at the psychology of the players, the managers, and the fans in the stands.
I really love that framing. We're setting the tone right now. This isn't just a match recap. If you just want to know who scored and when, you can check your phone.
Yeah, Google can tell you that.
Right. This is an exploration of modern football philosophy. We are going to dive deep into expected goals, or XG, breaking down the difference between creating the mathematical probability of a goal and actually putting the ball in the net.
Which is a massive gap right now.
The huge gap. We're going to dissect the sheer psychological weight of protecting a narrow lead in the modern era. And we're going to look at the immense, almost breaking point tension between what the data says is the safe way to play versus what the fans desperately feel is necessary for the soul of the club. Okay, let's unpack this.
To truly grasp the deep frustration that bubbled up across the community after this match, we really have to trace the narrative arc of the 90 minutes.
Yeah, walk us through that timeline.
The timeline of this 2-1 result tells a very specific story of shifting momentum and shifting mentalities. Arsenal came out and established early, convincing dominance. They controlled the tempo. They took the lead in the 21st minute.
That was the William Saliba header, right?
Yes. Saliba from very close range, capitalizing beautifully on a corner. At that point, the script was going exactly as written.
You look at that first 20 minutes and think, well, they are asserting their will. This is going to be a routine dismantling.
That was the feeling in the stadium, absolutely.
But then, deep into first half stoppage time, tragedy strikes out of nowhere. A Piero Hincapié own goal. In the 45th plus 2 minutes, it levels the game going into the break.
Completely against the run of play.
Totally chaotic. But suddenly, the teams are walking down the tunnel at 1-1. The entire mood of the stadium shifts.
Which forces a massive reset. In the second half, Arsenal comes back out, regains their composure, and takes the lead again in the 66th minute.
The Jurriën Timber header.
Right. Again from close range. Again from a set-piece delivery by Declan Rice. So it's 2-1 Arsenal. They have restored order. And then comes the critical hinge point of the entire match.
This is the moment.
The moment that defined all the post-match analysis. Just 4 minutes later, the 70th minute, Chelsea's Pedro Neto is sent off with a second yellow card for a late cynical foul.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because put yourself in the stadium. You have a 2-1 lead. You are at home at the Emirates. Your opponent, a historic rival, is suddenly reduced to 10 men with 20 minutes plus stoppage time left on the clock.
Right.
Every single fan in that stadium and everyone watching at home is expecting total suffocating control.
It's the historical expectation.
Exactly. You go for the jugular, you put the game to bed, you make it 3-1, maybe 4-1, you embarrass them. But instead,
we witnessed a massive, deliberate tactical retreat.
Yes.
What's fascinating here is the sheer predictability of that retreat from a pure data standpoint. And that is contrasted with the total shock and anger it delivers to the fan psychology.
Just oil and water.
Once Chelsea went down to 10 men, Arsenal fundamentally changed their entire posture on the pitch. Think about the geometry of the field for a second.
Okay.
Instead of utilizing the extra man to stretch the pitch wide, create overloads on the flanks, and exhaust the Chelsea defense with relentless, high-tempo possession in the final third.
Which is what everyone expected.
Right. Instead of that, Arsenal dropped their defensive line back toward their own penalty area. They actively invited pressure.
It was baffling to watch.
They engaged in a late-game strategy that relied heavily on absorbing whatever chaotic, desperate attacks a 10-man Chelsea could muster, rather than neutralizing those attacks by keeping the ball away from them.
And reading through the post-match threads, I mean, the fans were absolutely livid. The frustration is just palpable. And it isn't just mindless complaining. These are deeply analytical observations from a fan base that understands the game.
They know what they're watching.
They really do. I pulled a few quotes directly from the community forums. One fan specifically asked, "Why can't we retain the ball to kill off games?"
Very fair question.
They pointed out that the team puts themselves under so much unnecessary pressure with aimless long balls. Another highly upvoted comment called those final 15 minutes outright disgraceful.
Disgraceful is a strong word for a win.
It is, but they felt it. And my personal favorite, one supporter, noted that the team almost snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. It felt like they were watching a slow-motion car crash that they somehow managed to swerve away from at the last possible second.
That phrase, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, perfectly encapsulates the modern anxiety of the low block.
It really does.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the historical context of this football club. Think about the Invincibles era.
Oh man, what a team.
Think about teams marshaled by Patrick Vieira, attacks orchestrated by Dennis Bergkamp, and finished by Thierry Henry.
Untouchable.
If you presented that historical Arsenal team with a 1-goal lead and a 10-man opponent at Highbury, the outcome wasn't just inevitable, it was a foregone conclusion.
They would systematically dismantle you.
They wouldn't drop deep. They would dominate the ball, move it relentlessly side to side, drain the physical life and psychological hope out of the opposing players, and eventually score another goal through sheer, sustained pressure. It was death by 1,000 passes.
It was absolute suffocation. It was like a boa constrictor wrapping around the opponent. You knew it was over. The 10 men on the other side were just praying for the final whistle so they could go home.
Exactly.
But today, against a depleted Chelsea, it felt so anxious. It felt frantic. It felt like they were holding onto a cliff edge by their fingernails.
Yeah.
I have to laugh, though, because one fan in the subreddit said that the ending of the game took 2 years off my lifespan.
I saw that one.
And honestly, if you were watching those final minutes, if Chelsea throwing caution to the wind, hurling bodies forward, and Arsenal just booting aimless clearances into the night sky, that stress is incredibly relatable. But why does that happen? Has the game just gotten too fast to suffocate a team anymore?
That is a brilliant question.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings us directly to the engine room of the team, the midfield.
Right.
Because a tactical retreat isn't just about where the center backs stand. It's heavily dictated by how the midfield handles the ball when they actually win it back.
You need an out ball.
A low block only works if, when you get the ball, you can relieve the pressure. The tactical breakdowns from the weekend highlight a very specific modern struggle in this regard. When Arsenal had the ball in those final 20 minutes, unchallenged with an extra man, they completely failed to retain possession.
They just kept giving it right back.
The data and fan observations pointed heavily toward Martin Zubimendi in this specific phase of the match.
Yes. Looking at the player ratings and the specific tactical critiques, the community called out Zubimendi and his tendency in those crucial late-game moments to keep the ball aerial even when he was under absolutely no pressure.
Which is a massive risk.
Anyone who watches the Premier League knows that an aerial ball is a 50-50 ball. It's a coin toss. It leads to frequent turnovers. The fans were practically screaming through their keyboards. Why are we tossing a coin for possession when we have a numerical advantage? We have 11 men, they have 10. Just pass it on the grass.
To understand why that happens, we have to look at the mechanics of a 10-man press and the profiles of modern midfielders. Zubimendi is what tactical analysts might call a first-phase controller.
Break that down for us.
He is excellent at taking the ball deep from his own center backs, turning, and initiating a sequence when the game is structured. But when a game devolves into chaos, when a 10-man team abandons their shape and just starts sprinting at you in sheer desperation, the time you have on the ball evaporates.
The pitch shrinks.
Exactly. The pitch shrinks. When Zubimendi receives the ball facing his own goal, under chaotic pressure, his instinct in this match was to clear the danger by lofting it.
Just get it out of there.
Right. But the fans astutely pointed out the gaping hole left by the absence, or the specific need, for a player like Martin Odegaard in those exact situations. Odegaard is described by the community as an all-phase controller.
Let's drill into that term all-phase controller, because I think that's the crux of the issue. Odegaard does something very specific that maybe goes unnoticed by the casual viewer who just wants to see shots on goal, but it is absolute gold dust for blood pressure management.
It really is.
He recycles possession. Sometimes fans of a more direct, heavy metal style of football might think he takes too many touches or passes sideways too often. But in a 2-1 game against 10 frantic men, that recycling is everything. He actively calms the team down.
He does. And it's all about geometry. Against 10 men, the center of the pitch becomes an absolute traffic jam. An all-phase controller like Odegaard doesn't just pass sideways blindly.
Right.
He receives the ball under pressure, takes a highly technical touch to evade the first man, and specifically drags the opposing defensive midfielder 2 steps out of position.
He's baiting them.
Exactly. He's baiting them. By doing that, he creates a 3-foot passing lane that literally did not exist a second ago. He moves the ball into that lane, resets the shape, and keeps the ball high up the pitch, far away from his own penalty area.
So smart.
He forces the 10-man opposition to chase shadows. He used the geometry of the pitch to neutralize their physical exertion.
Which is such a highly technical, almost clinical way of viewing control. And the contrast here with historical angers is just brilliant. When Arsenal fans discuss midfield control, especially in the context of holding on to a gritty lead, the ghost of Patrick Vieira always looms incredibly large.
Always. He's the benchmark.
In the community discussions we pulled from, fans literally voted Vieira as the most irreplaceable player in the history of the club. But the kind of control Vieira offered was completely different from what Odegaard offers, wasn't it?
Night and day. And this is a vital distinction to make when we talk about the evolution of the sport. Odegaard represents a modern, highly technical, possession-based control. It's about spatial awareness, intricate passing triangles, and avoiding physical duels by moving the ball faster than the man can run.
Whereas
Vieira offered pure physical and psychological dominance. He didn't just control the ball, he controlled the emotional temperature of the entire stadium.
I remember watching him. He had this massive stride. He would practically swallow up the midfield. He was a defensive anchor who intimidated opponents just by standing in the tunnel before the match even kicked off.
That psychological weight is something analytics struggle to quantify. If the team was getting frantic, if they were under pressure like they were against Chelsea, Vieira wouldn't look for a passing triangle.
No, he'd just go in.
He would step up, win a crushing, borderline terrifying tackle, emerge with the ball, shield it with his giant frame, and practically force his teammates to organize through sheer presence. He was a human shield and a battering ram all at once. He dictated the terms of engagement.
But I have to ask, to play devil's advocate here, does that kind of physical intimidation even work in today's game? With VAR scrutinizing every challenge, with the modern interpretation of fouls, every hard tackle is a potential red card check. Has the game just evolved past the need or even the legality of a Vieira?
This raises a profoundly important point about how the rules shape the tactics.
Yeah.
You are entirely correct. The game has legislated the enforcer role out of existence.
You just can't do it anymore.
You cannot tackle the way Vieira tackled in 2002. You cannot physically intimidate players without risking a sending off. Therefore, modern teams must rely on systemic, passing-based control. They have to use geometry instead of muscle.
Right.
But the flaw in that modern system is exactly what we saw against Chelsea. When that passing breaks down, when a player like Zubimendi panics and keeps the ball aerial instead of finding the pass, chaos ensues. You no longer have the human shield to fall back on. You just have turnovers.
So if the midfield is frantic, turning the ball over, or if they are sitting too deep in a low block and not providing that connecting tissue up the pitch, it has to completely isolate the forwards.
Absolutely. They get cut off.
They end up stranded on an island. And that perfectly sets up our next major focus, the immense, overwhelming frustration regarding the final third execution. Because reading the sources, this wasn't just a one-off bad 15 minutes against Chelsea. This final third inefficiency seems to be a recurring nightmare for the fan base right now.
It is a deeply ingrained recurring issue. And the advanced metrics we pulled from the XG philosophy really lay bare the shocking extent of the problem.
Let's hear the numbers.
For our listeners who track expected goals, the numbers from this specific match tell a story of massive underperformance. Arsenal generated 1.58 xG compared to Chelsea's 1.17. They created the better quality chances overall.
But 1.58 xG is still fairly low for a team that had a man advantage for a significant chunk of the game. That translates to roughly 3 or 4 clear-cut situations where you're off your couch expecting the net to bulge, but nothing comes of it.
Exactly.
And when you zoom out, the data we're looking at is genuinely alarming. Coming into this stretch, Arsenal players had scored just 1 goal from a staggering 9.23 xG across 4 recent games. Think about that math. 9.23.
It's hard to believe.
And just prior to that, they managed 0 goals from 6.16 xG over 3 games. That is a massive execution gap.
It is a statistical anomaly that points to a severe psychological block. When you generate 9.23 xG, the mathematical expectation is that you score roughly 9 goals.
Right.
Scoring only 1 means you are experiencing historically bad finishing. You are doing all the incredibly difficult tactical work to manipulate the opponent, bypass the midfield, and create the optimal shooting opportunity, and then completely failing at the final crucial hurdle.
It's just devastating.
To put that into perspective, you have to look at the historical efficiency required to secure Premier League championships.
Which the fans were doing constantly in the forums. They were looking back at lethal finishers like Ian Wright, speaking about him with almost religious reverence.
It was ruthless.
Strikers of that era didn't need 3 or 4 xG to score a single goal. They often drastically outperformed their expected metrics because of sheer instinct and ruthlessness. They didn't think, they just struck. And the fans remember what this current team is actually capable of when they are clicking. Just last year, Arsenal put 5 goals past this same Chelsea team.
5 goals. Total demolition. And now they are scraping by with a 2-1 win while taking years off the fans' lives. And the community knows exactly who they are frustrated with right now.
Yeah, there was a clear target.
The spotlight in the post-match analysis was intensely focused on Ebereki Eze. The fans specifically called him out for his decision-making, or rather his hesitation, in the final third.
The comments on Eze were brutal, but honestly, they were incredibly descriptive of the problem. They noted that in the first half alone, he had 3 to 4 genuinely good chances inside the box.
Clear sights of goal.
Situations where he had the ball on his preferred foot with a clear sight of goal. But instead of pulling the trigger, instead of shooting immediately, he took 2, 3, sometimes 4 extra touches.
Overcomplicating it.
He tried to dribble past a man who was already beaten. One fan made a hilarious, highly sarcastic comment that Eze plays like every opposing center back is Dragusin and VD, meaning Virgil van Dijk.
That's a great line.
It's like he feels he has to beat the best defenders in the world 3 times over before he feels he has permission to take a shot. The overriding mantra from the fan base was incredibly simple and desperate. Literally just shoot. You never know what can happen. A deflection, a rebound, just test the keeper.
What we are describing here is the extra touch syndrome.
The extra touch syndrome. I like that.
It is a fascinating psychological phenomenon that has infected modern football. And it is intrinsically linked to the rise of data analytics. We have to understand why highly skilled attackers, players who've been scoring goals their entire lives, suddenly freeze and fall into this trap.
I see Eze taking those 3 extra touches in the box, and it's maddening as a spectator. Are they just overthinking the analytics? Are they trying to literally walk the ball into the net to get a higher XG probability on the spreadsheet?
That is the ultimate paradox of the modern attacker. Yes, they are absolutely overthinking the math.
Really?
Modern players are raised in academies that drill high-value possession into them. They are acutely aware of the analytics. If an attacker shoots from a tight angle or from outside the box and they miss, the video analysis room on Monday morning will show them that they gave away possession on a shot that only had a 3% probability of scoring.
So they get chewed out for taking a risk.
The player internalizes this. They think, I must only shoot when the math is undeniably good.
So they get the ball in a 10% probability position, and instead of taking the instinctual shot, they try to beat a man to improve the angle.
Exactly. They beat a man, and the hypothetical math goes to 15%. They try to beat another to get it to 25%. But football is played in milliseconds.
You don't have that time.
By the time they take that third touch to optimize the shot, the defender recovers, the passing lane closes, and the shot is blocked. The pursuit of the perfect statistical shot gives the defense the vital time they need to recover, which destroys the chance altogether. They optimize their way into a turnover.
That is mind-blowing. The pursuit of perfection literally kills the execution. It's the difference between statistical expectation, generating the XG, and actual execution on the pitch, which requires raw, instinctual confidence.
Instinct is getting coached out of them.
When you look at historical greats like Ian Wright, or even just highly confident modern strikers like Erling Haaland, they shoot on instinct. The extra touch is almost always a symptom of a lack of confidence or an over-adherence to tactical instructions. They are passing up perfectly viable scoring opportunities because they are afraid of taking a bad shot.
And this creates a devastating ripple effect throughout the entire team.
Yeah.
Because when the attack is misfiring and completely failing to convert their chances, and the midfield is frantically turning the ball over because they lack a calming controller, all of that pressure rolls downhill.
It has to go somewhere.
It cascades backward. It lands squarely and heavily on the shoulders of the last line of defense.
Which, in this case, brings us to goalkeeper David Raya. And this is where the fan sentiment completely flips. It is a 180-degree turn.
A total shift in tone.
Despite the team's massive struggles to control the midfield or close out the game in the final third, the fans are absolutely ecstatic about Raya's performance. Scrolling through the post-match ratings, he was universally called MOTM, Man of the Match.
He earned it.
They were referring to him affectionately as El Gato, the cat. He was the sole beacon of hope in those final 20 minutes.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
If we analytically evaluate why the fans believe Raya is currently performing so far above expectations, it comes down to two things: the sheer volume of his interventions and his staggering agility.
Talk about the volume first.
When a team sits back in a tactical low block against 10 frantic men, as Arsenal did, they are essentially inviting chaotic, desperate crosses, cutbacks, and speculative shots into their penalty area. The defensive line is so deep that the goalkeeper is constantly in the firing line.
I was watching the highlights, and Raya isn't just making routine catching practice saves. He is making outstanding reaction-based point-blank saves through a crowd of bodies.
You can't even see the ball half the time.
His sight lines are blocked, there are deflections everywhere, and he is just clawing the ball off the goal line to preserve that incredibly narrow lead.
Which is incredibly physically and mentally taxing. To truly appreciate what Raya is doing in this modern system, we should contrast it with the historical greats of the club.
Okay, let's do that.
If we look at a legendary figure like David Seaman, who was universally praised in the historical player discussions we reviewed, how does Raya's current job description contrast with what Seaman had to do during the Invincibles era?
That's a great comparison, because Seaman had this incredible aura of calm, didn't he? But he was playing behind a completely different setup.
Precisely. It highlights how the manager's tactical setup entirely dictates the goalkeeper's reality.
Yeah.
David Seaman played behind a legendary rock-solid defense led by Tony Adams, Martin Keown, and Lee Dixon.
A wall.
And that defense was wildly proactive. They didn't sit in a low block. They squeezed the pitch. They utilized a notoriously aggressive offside trap. They prevented the opponent from generating volume.
Right, they kept the action near the halfway line, not in the penalty box.
Exactly. Because of that proactive defense, Seaman was known for his incredible concentration and longevity. He might literally stand in his penalty area for 80 minutes and face 0 shots.
Which is its own kind of challenge.
He was dealing with intense isolation, but when the offside trap finally failed, he would face 1 or 2 high-quality breakaway chances, and he had to be completely mentally ready to make that one crucial one-on-one save.
So Seaman was dealing with isolation punctuated by sudden, terrifying moments of high jeopardy, whereas Raya is dealing with a constant barrage.
Raya's reality is constant chaos. Because the modern Arsenal team deliberately invites pressure by sitting deep to protect the lead, Raya is constantly involved. He faces 10, 15 crosses a game.
It's relentless.
He has to command a crowded box, sweep up loose balls that drop between the center backs, and rely heavily on that El Gato agility because the shots are coming through dense traffic. It's a fundamentally different, significantly higher volume, and arguably more physically exhausting type of goalkeeping. He is the Band-Aid covering up the tactical retreat.
Okay, we've talked extensively about Arsenal's internal struggles with this game. The misfiring attack, the frantic midfield, the overburdened goalkeeper. But to really, truly grasp how poorly this game was managed in those final stages, we have to look at the opponent.
We need the Chelsea context.
Because Chelsea didn't just happen to go down to 10 men. They are currently an absolute study in systemic chaos and indiscipline.
The statistics surrounding Chelsea right now are genuinely historic, and for all the wrong reasons. Pedro Neto's second yellow card in the 70th minute wasn't an isolated incident. That was Chelsea's ninth Premier League red card of the season.
9 red cards, and we're not even at the end of the season yet. That is an absurd lack of discipline.
It is unprecedented. The deep dive from The Athletic explicitly confirms that no team in Premier League history has been shown more red cards in a single campaign.
Never happened before.
It points to a deep systemic issue regarding emotional control and tactical fouling. And the cost of that indiscipline is severe. The statistics show that Chelsea has earned only 5 points from a possible 21 in matches where they received a red card.
5 points from 21. That is bleeding points.
When you are constantly playing a man down at this elite level, you bleed points. You physically exhaust your remaining players.
And the Chelsea manager, Liam Rose Sr., isn't hiding from it in the press conferences. Looking at his post-match comments, he was remarkably direct. He talked openly about how set play issues and discipline issues have started to deeply infect their game.
He was surprisingly honest.
He essentially admitted that all the intricate passing and attacking patterns they work on during the week don't matter at all if they can't eradicate these fundamental, fatal flaws.
Rose Sr. is identifying the exact pain points that cost them this match. They conceded twice from corners against Arsenal. Saliba and Timber both scoring from close-range headers in the 6-yard box. That is the set play issue glaringly obvious. They cannot defend a dead ball. And then Neto gets sent off for a reckless foul after already being on a yellow for dissent.
Wow.
That is the discipline issue. It is a highly toxic combination that makes it nearly impossible to build sustained momentum in a league as punishing as the Premier League.
Now, before we move on, I have to mention this because it absolutely dominated the fan discourse online. And you simply cannot talk about this match without acknowledging the massive refereeing controversies that had both fan bases screaming at their screens.
It was chaotic.
And just to be crystal clear to you, the listener,
Yeah.
we are absolutely not taking sides here. We are impartially reporting on the sheer volume of frustration and distrust directed at the PGMOL and the match officials from both sets of supporters.
Reaction was visceral across the board.
Yeah.
The level of scrutiny on every single whistle is at an all-time high.
Extremely high. On the Chelsea side, fans were irate about what they called WWE tactics on corners.
I saw those screenshots.
They pointed to specific moments, posting screenshots and slow-motion replays, claiming bear hugs and two-hand punches were being aggressively used by Arsenal defenders in the penalty area during set pieces, completely without punishment. They felt entirely aggrieved that penalties weren't given.
And on the other side.
Meanwhile, on the Arsenal side, fans were furious about a specific moment involving Victor Gyökeres. They called out what they saw as a blatant simulation dive to win a foul. They were jokingly but angrily calling him a Fallon de Floor nominee and were outraged he wasn't booked for simulation.
The paranoia is real.
The level of distrust toward the refereeing from both sides was staggering. Every decision was viewed as a conspiracy.
And while those refereeing controversies dominate the emotional response on social media, if we connect this back to our main tactical analysis, it frames a really vital, highly critical question.
Hit me.
If Chelsea is this historically undisciplined, if they are hemorrhaging points due to a record number of red cards, if their manager admits they cannot defend set pieces, why did Arsenal struggle so profoundly to close them out?
Exactly. That is the multi-million-dollar question. If your opponent is actively self-destructing, if they are physically exhausted from playing with 10 men week after week, why are you holding on for dear life? Why are you dropping into a low block and punting the ball away?
It's the core paradox.
And that brings us to the grand finale of this deep dive. Pragmatism versus psychology. We need to look at what this ideological clash means for actual title contention. Because as we said at the start, this isn't just about one sloppy 20-minute spell against Chelsea. This is about a pattern of behavior from the manager and the squad.
We have to reconcile two completely opposing viewpoints. We have to reconcile the manager's statistical argument for a pragmatic defense with the fan base's psychological need for attacking aggression. This is the core philosophical conflict in modern football.
So let's look at the manager side first.
From the manager's perspective, in this case, Mikel Arteta, he is looking at highly advanced data models that you and I don't even have access to. Those models almost certainly suggest that when you hold a narrow one-goal lead, especially late in a game, the mathematically optimal way to secure the win and reduce variance is to drop deep.
Break down that math for us. Why is dropping deep considered low variance?
Because of the types of chances you concede. If you push high up the pitch to try and score a third goal, you leave massive amounts of empty space behind your defenders.
If you turn it over.
If the opponent wins the ball and counters into that empty space, the XG of a one-on-one breakaway is massive. It's highly likely to result in a goal.
Right, that's high variance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, if you drop your 10 men to the edge of your own penalty box, you eliminate that space behind you. You force the opponent to try and pass through a wall of bodies or resort to crossing the ball from wide areas. The data tells Arteta that a cross into a crowded box has a very low probability of resulting in a goal, maybe 2 or 3%.
So he's just playing the odds.
Statistically, inviting crosses is safer than risking a counterattack. The manager is playing the percentages. He is trying to mathematically guarantee the 3 points.
But the fans vehemently argue that this spreadsheet math completely neglects the human psychology of the sport. Football is played by emotional human beings, not algorithms.
That's the tension.
The fans in the forums were incredibly eloquent about this point. They argue that going for the kill, keeping your foot on the gas, and trying to score that third goal creates immense belief and momentum within your own squad. It puffs their chests out. It deeply demoralizes the opponent.
It's proactive.
Conversely, when you go into a defensive shell against a depleted team, you are effectively sending a psychological message to the opposition that says, we are afraid of what you might do.
You hand them the psychological initiative. You allow a beaten team to feel dangerous again.
Exactly. It creates belief for the other team. They think, wait, they're backing off. We can actually get something out of this. And just as importantly, it breeds immense toxic anxiety in the stands, which transfers down to the players on the pitch. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of panic.
It is the classic debate between playing not to lose versus playing to win dominantly. And this raises the ultimate defining question for the rest of the season.
Can they keep doing this?
If this habit of sitting deep against depleted opponents continues, if this is the ingrained tactical philosophy, what are the broader implications for title contention? Can a team sustain this level of high-wire anxiety, inviting pressure week after week over a grueling 38-game season without eventually slipping up?
One fan speculated on this perfectly, drawing a very apt comparison. They pointed out that Manchester City, the ultimate benchmark for title contention, has also been winning ugly recently. They've been grinding out 1-0 and 2-1 wins.
That's true, they have been.
The fan asked if you can play terrorist ball, which for those who don't know is this very dramatic, evocative internet slang used by fans to describe this ultra-defensive, joyless, pragmatic style of play. Can you play terrorist ball all the way to a Premier League title?
That is the defining debate of the modern era. Some analysts argue that championships are won exactly this way. They argue that titles are secured by grinding out ugly 2-1 victories on rainy days when your final third execution is utterly failing you, which we know Arsenal's was, given their horrific XG conversion rate.
They survived the bad day.
They argue that pragmatism, the ability to suffer and survive, is the ultimate hallmark of champions. You don't get style points, you just get 3 points.
But what's the counter-argument? Because surely you can't just survive every week.
The counter-argument is that the total lack of psychological dominance, the inability to put lesser or depleted teams to the sword and rest your players in the final 20 minutes, will eventually cause a critical season-ending slip-up.
Because you're constantly living on the edge.
When you constantly invite pressure, you invite the variance back in that you were trying to avoid. You invite the possibility of a lucky deflection. You invite a momentary lapse in concentration. You invite a controversial refereeing error tying the game. You are playing with fire.
The Invincibles didn't do that.
The historical greats didn't invite pressure. They extinguished it by keeping the ball.
Wow. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. Let's just quickly recap the intense journey we've been on. We explored the deep tension between Arsenal's ability to generate high XG and their frustrating, agonizing hesitation in the final third. The infamous extra touch syndrome born from overanalyzing the game.
We covered a lot.
We traced the complex evolution of midfield control, looking at how the immense physical and psychological titans of the past, like Patrick Vieira, have been replaced by highly technical, geometry-focused recycling specialists like Martin Odegaard.
A total paradigm shift.
And we examined the nerve-wracking, nail-biting reality of the modern tactical retreat, where data dictates a low block even against a historically undisciplined 10-man Chelsea side, leaving goalkeepers like David Raya to clean up the chaotic volume.
It paints a highly complex picture of a team that is statistically superior, highly structured, but psychologically strained. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, somewhat philosophical thought to mull over, building on everything we've dissected today.
Give it to us.
If advanced data and modern analytics increasingly point toward these pragmatic, low-block defensive retreats as the mathematically optimal way to secure a narrow lead, are we witnessing the slow, inevitable extinction of the swashbuckling, relentless attacking football that defined the historical champions we so deeply revere?
That's a huge question.
Will future generations of fans look at winning ugly not as a frustrating flaw to be corrected, but as the absolute perfected final form of the sport?
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought to end on. Does the pursuit of mathematical perfection eventually optimize all the romance and joy right out of the game? That is definitely something to debate at the pub this weekend. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It is your intense curiosity and demand for real, unflinching analysis that makes these explorations possible. Keep asking the tough questions, keep looking past the surface, and we'll see you next time.